Hello, it's Cassie. Welcome back once again, second time today. I have a fun project for you guys today. If you like mixed media, stick around. If you don't, stick around anyway because you might really enjoy what we're going to be making today. I am planning on making a ocean wall hanging basically, and I've got these Brutus Monroe chipboard jumbo tags. These are the scalloped edge tags, and I've pulled this one out, and I'm going to start off by using some white gesso and a paintbrush all over this tag. Gesso is one of those things, if you've never used it, gesso is just basically a prepper. So it is just prepping the surface of this tag to get ready to handle different types of mediums. And I'm excited about it, honestly. I don't do mixed media that often, but when I do, I love it. It is fun to get dirty. It's fun to just kind of get messy, and I love mixed media because it's very, very forgiving. You can make mistakes and you can cover it up if you don't like it. So I'm mixing around my gesso and then adding just another little couple spots, and it doesn't matter that I've got brush strokes back there. That just adds to the texture. So I'm done with my gesso, and you're going to find that if you don't do mixed media, you'll use, one of the things you use a lot is your heat tool. Well, or maybe it's just me because I'm impatient. So I grab my heat tool a lot, and I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of dry. Now I'm grabbing the media paste, and what this does is, once again, adds texture. So I'm just taking my palette knife and I'm scraping this all along that bottom right edge, and I don't want it to be perfect. I just want kind of chunky, messy texture. And then I'm going to take it up on the upper left hand side and do the same sort of thing. And as I'm doing that, I start to realize, you know what, I actually want to use the July stencil of the month. This thing is gorgeous. So I'm going to stick that up in the corner, grab a little bit more of that media paste, and I'm going to put it all over the stencil, just in that upper corner, not even making sure that it's perfect. Peel that off and look at that texture. Now this just all adds to the layers, honestly. So I've got my layer of gesso, now I've got some layer of media paste, and I'm going to heat that. Just keeping my heat tool moving. I don't want to, just keep it on one specific spot. And once that's fairly dry, or no, once it's 100% dry, so I'm testing it, I'm going to take my embossing ink, and I'm just going to go over the top of that bottom texture that I did, and I'm grabbing my Sandcastle embossing powder, and I'm going to pour that all over that. So doing the texture on the bottom first is going to really make this embossing powder do something that it normally couldn't do. Now you get texture with embossing powder, but adding the media paste under it just adds a whole different level. And they work beautifully together. So I'll heat my embossing powder till that is smooth and melted. Well, it's not going to be smooth because there is going to be some texture under it. And you can see as it melts, you can start to see some of that texture underneath. I am trying to make this look like sand because I want to make this look like a little bit of a beach scene, a messy beach scene, if you will. And so take a look at that texture under that. You couldn't get that just with embossing powder. So I'll cool that down a little, and then I'm going to move on to using some Chroma glaze. If you're not familiar with this, it's a shiny, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a spreads like butter, which I'm doing with my palette knife, and I'm being kind of messy with that, adding some, you can add texture with this, it'll keep some peaks, which is nice, and I'm adding that all over the stencil background, letting some of it stick up high and some of it not, and then just kind of spreading it around. It will dry shiny, which I like that about the Chroma glaze, and I love this color. This is the Blue Jay color, and once I'm done with that, I'll just put the lid back on, and then I'm going to grab my Pearl Chroma glaze. Now the pearl looks white as you pull it out, but it won't dry white. It will dry clear with a little bit of a sheen. I just want it for the texture. I will be honest that I did think that maybe it would be a little bit white, but when it dries, it is clear. I did put it on my glass media mat because I didn't want to mix the blue with the pearl because my blue is still wet. And when I have the texture that I want, I left a lot of peaks in there, as you can see. I'm going to kind of go over the top of this with my heat tool, constantly moving. You don't want to keep your heat tool on the Chroma glaze in one specific spot because it will bubble. Or maybe that's the look you're going for, I'm not sure. And so I'm getting that kind of dry, and it's still a little bit wet, and that's okay. But so I'll grab my heat tool again. I let things cool down sometimes, and then I'll bring my heat tool back. Just kind of trying to speed along the process. Now I did all this on my glass media mat, and this is the beauty of it. I can just grab a baby wipe, and I'm going to be able to wipe all of that mess up. If you didn't have a glass media mat, just some paper would work. That's fine, but I find the cleanup with the glass media mat is just fantastic. Now I'm going to grab my locomotive surface ink, and I'm going to rub it all over the edges, and I'm even going to rub it where I had the stencil, and then I'll take my finger and rub it around. I am loving the darkness of it, so I'm going to rub that all over the edge because I really want that to stay dark. I didn't want it to be too dark over the stencil. And then I'm going to even push it onto the little ring that I had set aside. This is just for added interest. And I don't even make it perfect. I don't want it to be perfect. And then once again, I'll grab a baby wipe, wipe off my hands, and clean up my mess. And then I'll put my ink cube away. Now the surface ink will stay dry or stay wet for a little while. And so with that, you will want to heat set it or set it aside to dry on its own for a while. I am just too impatient, so once again I will grab my heat tool and then I will start to dry that. It dries pretty well when it's just on the gesso, but when you've added it on top of Chroma glaze and other things, it will stay wet for a little bit. It's completely dry now, and I wanted to take my embossing ink and go over those peaks of where I had originally put the pearl Chroma glaze. And so I just used my finger and dabbed that all over, and I'm going to take my Alabaster embossing powder over the top of that. And then I'll wipe away where I don't want some of that texture. And then there you'll have the foam that would have normally been maybe for a wave. So I will heat that with my heat tool as well. And I am loving the texture that comes underneath with that pearl Chroma glaze. Because once again, I couldn't get that with embossing powder. I might be, well, no, you really couldn't. Because once you melt it and then put it back on again, it's just going to melt back into it. All right, so to adhere those little round pieces to my tag, I'm just using some Brutus Monroe craft glue. And then to keep that down, I'll just stick a stamp block on top of it till it dries. Now I'm going to get ready to add some of my finishing touches. So there's the picture. This was taken while we were in Monterey last month for my father-in-law's retirement. My daughter and I, well, all of us were up on the beach, and we just got this really pretty picture of the two of us. And I love it. So that was the inspiration for this whole background. I've grabbed some navy cardstock, and I also grabbed the stamp set that is called Take Flight. And this has a beautiful butterfly and some gorgeous sentiments. And I put my embossing bag, my magic embossing bag, all over that dark blue paper. And then I'm going to take my stamps and I'm going to stamp those down onto that paper using the embossing ink. And then I will cover that with my Alabaster embossing powder. And I didn't do a great job of stamping that one edge of Enjoy, but I will fix that here in a little bit. So I'll pick up my mess, clean that up, and then I'm going to heat set my sentiments until those are smooth and melted. And I love watching embossing powder melt. I've said that before in many videos. It's fun. I don't know why it's so satisfying. Cool that off and I'll wipe that down, and then this is where I grab my white gel pen, and that way you can almost not tell at all that I didn't get it perfectly embossed. I'm going to use some 1/8 inch score tape to tack down my picture to some more of that dark blue cardstock. I just want to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, so that's why I'm using the score tape. And then I'll just peel off that backing paper. I didn't trim down the paper just yet because I had a plan for the paper anyway, so it didn't need to be perfect around my picture. So I'll just tack it down, and then I'm going to grab out my Fiskars cutter, and then I'll just line that up inside there, and I'm going to trim down the edges that still need to be trimmed. And then I'm going to go old school here. I am going to grab a, golly, I don't even know what you call it, where you rough up the edges. I don't remember what you call it, but it's really old school, back when we'd tear paper or we would rough up the edges with one of these almost like a razor blade, I guess. And then, yeah, I'll rough up all the edges. I thought that just went with the background a little bit. I didn't want everything to be so smooth and perfect. And then I will clean up my mess. I do decide that I want to fussy cut all around the word enjoy, just for a little bit of something different. And I'm realizing that I have said the word texture probably, I don't know, 100 times in this video, probably because I love to get a lot of that all over my projects when I'm doing mixed media. So that was the fussy cutting. Very simple, very easy. I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of my picture because I want to make sure that this doesn't go anywhere. And I do want it to be popped up a little bit because it's not going to be under a frame or anything. It can have some dimension. And so this is just my Scotch foam tape. I'll peel off the backing paper of that, and then I'm going to put it, my picture's going to be a little bit wonky because it goes with the waves. And then I'll decide where I want to have my sentiments, which is going to end up saying, enjoy the simple things. Because it was such a beautiful day there. We didn't get in the water because it was really cold there in Monterey, California. But it was very, very pretty. Very different than the East Coast, that's for sure. I'm using some skinny Derice strips because I want to just put a little bit on these parts, and where it overlaps the picture, I'm going to use some craft glue again. But I'm using it on the edges of the word enjoy, just on those little loops. And then I'll grab the craft glue once I've decided which glue I'm using. So I'll grab the craft glue, put it on those pieces that are still exposed, peel off the backing paper, and then I'll stick that down. Do the same thing with the word enjoy. And then I'll stick that down. And then for a final bit, I'm going to grab out, it's called the Organize Express, I guess is what it is. You can get these things like at Walmart or most places like that, or an office supply store. But it's basically, it makes labels. You know, it's the punch label thing. I love this thing. It's great for mixed media. Oh, and you can hear my cat in the background. But I punched out June 19, and I just thought it was too big. So then I punched out 6-19, which was a little bit better and a little bit smaller. I didn't want that to be the star of the show. And then I'll get that put down, and that is going to finish off my project for today. I'm over on the Brutus Monroe blog with this today, so head on over there and check out what we've been doing lately. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, because I'll do more mixed media and, of course, lots and lots of cards. And as always, guys, thank you so much for stopping by.